Find the equation of the tangent line for g of x equals sine 2x minus cosine x at the point x equals pi over 6. To find the equation of the tangent line, we need the x and y coordinates of the point. Well, we only have the x coordinate right now. X is pi over 6. So the first thing we need to do is find the corresponding y coordinate. And that's going to be found by plugging the pi over 6 into the g of x, which is sine of 2x minus cosine x. We're going to plug pi over 6 in there. And this will give us our y coordinate. It will be g of pi over 6. And that'll be sine of 2 pi over 6 minus cosine of pi over 6. Well, 2 of pi over 6 can reduce down to pi over 3. So we have the sine of pi over 3 minus the cosine of pi over 6. The sine of pi over 3 is root 3 over 2. And the cosine of pi over 6 happens to also be root 3 over 2. So when you subtract them, you get a 0. So apparently the y coordinates is 0. That means the coordinates of our point are pi over 6 comma 0. The next thing we need is the slope of the tangent line, and that's the derivative. So let's take the derivative of the function g of x. G prime of x will be the first term. We start with the derivative of the outermost function, that's the sine. The derivative of the sine will be the cosine. Leave its inside alone, 2x, but then multiply by the derivative of the inside to complete the chain rule. And then the next term we have the derivative of cosine, which is negative sine. It's being subtracted, so we have a double negative of x. And then we multiply by the derivative of its inside, but the derivative of x is just a 1 to complete the chain rule, so no change to that one. Let's rewrite this before we plug in. I'm going to move the 2 out front. Remember that 2 is not multiplying the 2x inside of cosine. It's multiplying the cosine itself, so we'll just put it to the front. And then the double negative means a positive, so plus sine of x. There's our derivative g prime of x. Our slope will be this derivative evaluated at the x-coordinate of our point. Well, the x-coordinate of our point there is the pi over 6, so g prime of pi over 6. And that's going to be 2 times the cosine of 2 pi over 6 plus the sine of pi over 6. 2 pi over 6 can reduce to pi over 3. The cosine of pi over 3 is a 1/2. The sine of pi over 6 is also a 1/2. So we have a 2/2, 2 times 1/2, plus a 1/2. They're already over a common denominator. So let's add them together. And it looks like our slope came out to a 3/2. So we now have the slope of the tangent line, and we have the point. We can set up the equation of the tangent line using the point slope formula. It will be y minus the y coordinate of the point, that's a 0, equals the slope, 3/2, times the quantity of x minus the x coordinate, that's the pi over 6. This is the point slope formula. We want to put it into the slope intercept form. That's where we solve for y in terms of x. The minus 0 is not needed, so we'll just ignore it. We'll distribute the 3/2 in, and we will have 3/2 x minus, multiply the numerators, 3 times pi, over, multiply the denominators, 2 times 6, which is a 12. We can reduce that 3 and the 12 in that fraction, so y will be 3/2 x minus pi over 4. There's the equation of the tangent line for that function g of x at the point x equals pi over 6. Y equals 3/2 x minus pi over 4.